I never imagined that a birthday party would be the moment everything finally snapped. The restaurant was a charming farmhouse-style place on the edge of Austin, draped in white fairy lights and bustling with laughter. Victoria, my sister, had rented the entire garden space for Olivia and Emma's 8th birthday. It looked straight out of a lifestyle magazine. Pristine, curated, perfect. Logan, my son, squeezed my hand tightly as we stepped onto the gravel path. He was 7, a quiet, thoughtful kid, and that afternoon he'd carefully chosen a navy blue cap that he said made him look like the sky right before the stars come out. I smiled, trying to encourage him, though inside I could already feel the old, familiar tension pulling tight across my chest. Victoria stood at the centre of the party like she owned the world, laughing in that sharp way that always made me feel like an intruder in my own family. She lifted her glass in a lazy half-toast when she spotted me, then turned back to her crowd. Daniel, my husband, caught my eye and gave me a subtle, steady nod. "Just breathe," he seemed to say. Logan had practiced his happy birthday all morning. He had even made 2 hand-drawn cards filled with rainbows and little suns, the kind that only a kid who believes in good things could create. I was already proud of him for being here. After the cake was cut and the candles blown out, Victoria announced it was time for the gift bags. A big deal for the kids. Each child's name was called, and they raced up, squealing over glittery totes filled with candy, bracelets, toys with their names embroidered in gold thread. Then came Logan's turn. An adult, one of Victoria's friends, I guessed, handed him a crumpled, dirty white paper bag. A sticky note was slapped crookedly on the front, reading in heavy black ink, "Try harder next time." The world slowed. Logan stared at the bag for a second, his little hands hesitating. He opened it slowly, hoping there'd been some mistake. Inside, a broken pencil, a discoloured mint, and a filthy grey eraser. That was it. No toy, no note of kindness, just humiliation in a bag. From across the yard, Victoria burst out laughing. "He's been a bit extra lately," she said with a smirk, as if mocking a child was some sort of sophisticated joke. Thought he could use a little reminder. Some people chuckled. Grandpa Henry didn't even look up from his sandwich. Grandma Ruth gave one of those tight smiles, the kind that said, "Don't make it worse." I squeezed Logan's hand, feeling the tremble in his fingers. He tried to smile, bless him, but it was the kind of brittle, heartbreaking smile kids wear when they're trying to pretend nothing hurts. I knelt down and whispered, "Let's go get a real treat, buddy." Daniel was already at my side, silent but solid. And so we left. No one stopped us. No one called out. And for the first time in my life, I understood this wasn't just a party. This was them showing me, and Logan, exactly where we stood. The car ride home was wrapped in silence, heavy and thick like a storm you could feel pressing against your skin. Logan sat curled up in the back seat, still clutching the wrinkled paper bag like it might somehow change if he just held on tight enough. I kept glancing at him through the rearview mirror, my chest tightening with every breath. Daniel drove, one hand on the wheel, the other resting near mine, close enough to touch if either of us had the words. But there were no words, not yet. Only the understanding that something had shifted tonight, quietly but permanently. When we got home, Logan didn't race to his room the way he usually did. He placed the bag carefully on the kitchen table, peeled off his navy cap, and climbed onto the couch, pulling the old Thanksgiving throw up to his chin. His handmade cards were still clutched in his hands, the rainbows he'd drawn now smudged and faded from his tight grip. He didn't cry, he didn't ask why. He just stared at the crumpled paper like it was something he was supposed to make sense of, Like maybe if he just tried hard enough, it would stop hurting. I sat down beside him, careful not to crowd him. Was it because? I forgot to say thank you, Logan whispered, still looking at the cards. His voice was so small, like he was afraid even the question would be too much. My heart cracked open right there. No, Logan, I said, keeping my voice as steady as I could. It wasn't your fault. You didn't do anything wrong. He nodded once, but he didn't seem convinced. He tucked the cards against his chest like a shield and turned his face into the couch cushion, hiding the tears he was trying so hard not to shed. Daniel came in a few minutes later, handing me a mug of hot tea. He didn't say anything, just sat across from us, his expression somber but steady, like he was trying to hold up the roof of the world with nothing but sheer will. This wasn't about the bag, he said finally, his voice low and certain. I nodded. I knew. Of course I knew. This had been brewing for years. The dismissive glances, the snide remarks disguised as jokes, the way Victoria could slice me in half with nothing but a laugh and a raised eyebrow. Tonight wasn't a one-off cruelty. It was a carefully wrapped message. We don't see you. We never did. We never will. I looked at Logan, sleeping now under the faded blanket, his small body curled up like he was trying to disappear into the fabric. This wasn't about me anymore. This was about him. And there, in that quiet living room, surrounded by the soft hum of the house settling for the night, I made a silent promise. I would not let them do to him what they had done to me. Not now. Not ever again. I kissed the top of his messy hair, tucked the blanket higher around his shoulders, and sat there in the dim glow of the kitchen light, keeping watch over the most important thing I would ever protect. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the kitchen floor, chasing away the night's heavy silence, but not the ache lodged deep in my chest. Daniel was already at the table, flipping through the morning news on his tablet, a steaming mug of coffee by his hand. When I entered, he looked up, no words necessary. We were already past small talk. I sat down, letting the warmth of my own coffee seep into my hands. Across the kitchen, Logan's paper bag from the party still sat untouched on the counter. That stupid yellow sticky note, "Try harder next time," was still stuck crookedly across the front. Looking at it was like taking a punch I wasn't ready for. But today wasn't about licking wounds. Today was about facing the truth we'd both been trying to pretend didn't exist for far too long. "You know, this isn't the first time," Daniel said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I didn't have to, because he was right. How many Thanksgivings had I spent biting my tongue while Grandpa Henry complained that Logan needed to toughen up, rolling his eyes any time my son flinched at loud noises? How many Christmases had Grandma Ruth chuckled behind her hand whenever Logan, overwhelmed by noise and strangers, chose to sit quietly in a corner rather than perform for family? How many family dinners had ended with Logan asking me later, voice barely a whisper, "Did I do something wrong, Dad?" And I had always said the same thing, "No, buddy. You're perfect just the way you are." And then I swallowed my own anger, telling myself it wasn't worth a fight, telling myself that family would change if we just waited long enough, if we just loved them harder. But love wasn't enough to change people who didn't want to see you. I stood up and went to my home office. There, tucked in the bottom drawer, was a folder I had started years ago without even realizing what I was building. Inside were snapshots of moments I had tried to forget. A printout of the text Victoria had sent after Logan's 5th birthday party. Maybe next year, try not making everything about his sensitivities. Screenshots of messages where Grandpa Henry had told me to stop raising a crybaby. The email where Grandma Ruth kindly suggested I enroll Logan in military-style summer camp to toughen him up. Even receipts, literal and emotional, of the times Daniel and I had bailed Victoria out of financial messes, covered parts of Grandpa Henry's bills without acknowledgement, showed up when no one else bothered. Page after page after page. Proof. History. And right at the top, I taped the sticky note from Logan's gift bag. Let them see it. Let them finally face what they had so casually carved into us over the years. Daniel came to the doorway, resting his hand against the frame. He didn't say anything for a long moment, just watched as I gathered the evidence of all the ways they had told us we weren't enough. "This time we don't look away," I said. My voice shook a little, but I meant every word. No more pretending. He nodded. That same quiet, immovable strength I'd fallen in love with years ago shining in his eyes. We made 3 copies. One for us, one for Victoria, and one for Aunt Margaret, the only person in our entire extended family who had ever treated Logan like he was someone to be celebrated, not tolerated. It was strange how calm I felt as I slid the folders into large envelopes. Not angry, not even sad anymore, just finished. Later that afternoon, Daniel drove while I sat quietly in the passenger seat, holding the envelopes in my lap. We pulled up to Victoria's neighbourhood, neat little suburban streets with SUVs in every driveway and manicured lawns that all somehow looked the same. I didn't knock. I didn't ring the bell. I simply walked up the path, placed the envelope squarely in the centre of her welcome mat, and turned away without a second glance. Daniel didn't say anything as I got back into the car, just reached over and squeezed my hand. A small gesture, but enough. On the way home, my phone buzzed once. Then again. And again. I didn't look. Not yet. When we pulled into our driveway, Logan was in the front yard with Daniel's dog, Max. His laughter, pure, full and unburdened, filled the air as he ran, his cap flapping wildly in the breeze. It hit me then, in a way it hadn't before. We weren't losing a family. We were saving one. That night, after Logan had gone to bed, I finally checked my phone. Missed calls. Text after text from Victoria, from Grandma Ruth, even a few from distant cousins who had probably been roped into the drama already. Victoria's messages were full of fury, denial, backpedaling. It was just a joke. You're overreacting. You're blowing everything out of proportion. If you don't stop this, you'll tear the family apart. The words blurred together after a while, all sounding exactly like the ones I had grown up hearing. Blame, shame, silence. Daniel sat beside me on the couch, skimming a few of the texts. When he reached the part where Victoria threatened to get a lawyer if necessary, he laughed, a low, incredulous sound. "They still think it's about winning," he said, as if this was ever a game. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because he was right. This wasn't about revenge. This was about finally telling the truth. No shouting, no dramatic confrontations, just the simple, undeniable truth. And if they couldn't handle it, if they chose to lash out instead of look inward, that wasn't my burden to carry anymore. That night I didn't dream of old arguments or cold birthday parties. I didn't dream of Victoria's smirks or Grandpa Henry's shrugs. Instead, I dreamed of Logan, running barefoot through the yard, laughing like the world itself loved him back. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I woke up without feeling like I owed anyone an explanation for choosing my son over their approval. The fallout came faster than I expected. By midday, my inbox was packed with emails titled things like Family Matters, Let's Talk, and From Victoria, a bolded urgent. There were Facebook posts too, thinly veiled pity grabs about how some people can't forgive one tiny mistake, splattered across the timelines of relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. I didn't engage. Not once. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table, a steaming mug of tea in my hand, while Daniel closed the last few loose ends, unsubscribing from the joint family phone plan we'd been quietly footing the bill for, transferring old utilities we had been tricked into maintaining, cancelling the automatic payments that had made us their safety net for so long. It was shocking how freeing it felt, severing those invisible tethers one by one. No dramatic speeches, no negotiations, just quiet, deliberate action. It felt like stitching up wounds that had been left open for years. That afternoon, I prepared the final folder, the one meant for Aunt Margaret, the only family member who had ever pulled me aside during a holiday dinner to whisper, "You see more than you let on, Evan. That's your strength." The only one who, when Logan was little, had brought him a handmade quilt stitched with planets and stars, saying, "Every kid needs to know they have a whole universe inside them." I printed a brief letter to include with the documents. Nothing accusatory, no drama, just the truth laid bare, the broken patterns, the small cruelties disguised as family jokes, the ongoing emotional neglect that had now reached my son. Before sealing the envelope, I added a sticky note, simple and sharp. "Some silences are complicity. I choose to speak." Then, without a second thought, I mailed it. The next few days were a blur of noise I refused to answer. Victoria called so many times that eventually I had to block her number. Grandpa Henry left a single voicemail, gruff and hollow, telling me, "Family isn't perfect, but it's the only one you get." It sounded more like a threat than advice. Grandma Ruth sent a card in her pristine cursive handwriting, the same style she used when she corrected my school essays. "Family is forgiveness. Don't destroy what can never be rebuilt." Underneath, she'd taped a small, dried flower, a guilt offering wrapped in nostalgia. I tore it in half without ceremony and dropped it into the trash. Forgiveness wasn't the issue. Forgiveness without change was just enabling cruelty. On the third day, there was a knock at the door. Daniel and I exchanged a glance. He set down the toolbox he was using to fix the backyard gate and moved beside me without a word. Through the peephole, I saw Grandma Ruth standing there, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Her eyes were red. Her shoulders, usually squared with that rigid pride, seemed smaller somehow. I didn't open the door, not because I wanted to punish her, but because I finally understood that protecting Logan and myself meant more than clinging to old loyalties. After a few minutes, she slid an envelope through the mail slot and shuffled away down the porch steps. Inside the envelope was another card, this time reading, "Thinking of you," and inside a handwritten message that said, "Family is worth fighting for. Don't let little things break blood ties. Little things." Years of erasure, of ridicule, of casual cruelty, all dismissed as little things. I picked up a pen and wrote across the card in steady, deliberate strokes. It's not a little thing when it's done for years. Then, without hesitation, I placed it back in the mailbox with a note to return it to sender. I felt no triumph, no vindication, only a deep anchored calm. And knowing that I was finally doing right by the boy sleeping down the hall, the one who deserved better than a family built on conditional love and manufactured loyalty. 2 days later, Logan came home from school with a painting he had made in art class. It was simple, childlike, a house with a sprawling garden, stick figures standing outside under a rainbow arch. He pointed to each figure. "That's you, that's Daniel, and that's me." Above the house, he'd written in crooked, bright blue letters, "Where I get to be me." I knelt down, tears pricking my eyes. I didn't need anyone's permission to protect what we had. I didn't need old ghosts telling me I was wrong. This This small, brilliant boy who felt safe enough to paint his home with pride was proof enough. Later that night, as Daniel and I sat on the back porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he nudged me gently. "You did good," he said simply. I smiled, a real, unburdened smile that felt like it came from somewhere I hadn't touched in years. "We did good," I corrected. And we sat there in the fading light, listening to the soft sounds of Logan playing in his room. A world finally quiet around us, not because we had silenced anyone, but because we had chosen the right noise to listen to. The sound of our own peace. The sound of starting over. It's funny, the kind of silence that fills your life when you finally stop chasing people who never wanted to see you. It's not hollow like loneliness. It's clean, like pulling the last thorn out of your skin after years of thinking it was just part of you. In the days that followed, the noise from Victoria and the rest of them died down to a trickle. A few lingering Facebook posts here and there, a handful of bitter messages from distant relatives who only knew one side of the story and weren't interested in hearing the other. I ignored all of it. It wasn't my job anymore to fix what they broke. One afternoon, Logan came into the kitchen, waving a piece of construction paper in his hand. "I wrote something for school," he said, beaming. He set it proudly on the table and read aloud, "Home is where I'm safe to be myself. Home is where my heart doesn't have to hide. Home is where my dad and Daniel are. That's all I need." I blinked fast, biting the inside of my cheek to keep from crying. Not because I was sad, because somehow, against everything, Logan still believed in love, real love. Unconditional, unshakable love. The kind I'd spent my entire childhood hoping for and never finding. Daniel ruffled Logan's hair as he passed, sliding a fresh glass of lemonade in front of him. No big speeches, no forced displays. Just the simple act of showing up, every day, without making it a performance. Weeks passed. Seasons began to turn. The days grew shorter, cooler, softer around the edges. One Saturday morning, I took Logan to the farmer's market on the edge of town. A collection of tents strung with flags. Vendors selling jars of wildflower honey and handmade soaps. Musicians playing guitar under the old oak trees. We wandered from booth to booth, buying a loaf of fresh bread here, a pint of strawberries there. I watched Logan interact with the vendors, smiling, chatting easily, showing none of the tightness, none of the fear that used to curl around him like a second skin when he was younger. When had he grown so confident? When had his shoulders dropped from that constant brace for impact? I knew when. The moment we stopped, asking him to be small enough to fit into a family that was too narrow to hold him. At one stand, he spotted a collection of watercolour paintings, blues and golds swirling into each other like dreams caught mid-motion. He stood there mesmerised. Without hesitation, Daniel stepped forward and bought one. Not because it matched the living room, not because it would impress anyone, but because Logan loved it. When we got home, we hung it right in the centre of our hallway, the first thing you saw when you walked in. It wasn't just a painting, it was a declaration. This is a home built on seeing each other. Of course, the past never disappears entirely. Every now and then, I'd get a text from Victoria, passive, aggressive little jabs, desperate fishing lines masked as olive branches. "Hope you're happy now. We're still family whether you like it or not. It's not too late to fix this." I didn't respond. Not because I was angry, because there was nothing left to say. I didn't need to justify choosing Logan. I didn't need to argue or explain or defend. The proof was in every breath my son took without hesitation. Every painting he made without worrying if it was good enough. Every night he slept soundly, knowing he was safe. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, Logan asked, "Dad, do you think people can change if you love them enough?" I set down the dish I was scrubbing and thought about it. About Grandpa Henry and Grandma Ruth, about Victoria, about every year I had spent trying to be smaller, quieter, easier to love. "No, buddy," I said finally, crouching down so we were eye to eye. "People change if they want to. Love can help, but it can't force anyone to be better." Logan thought about that for a moment, then nodded. He didn't seem crushed by the answer. He seemed relieved, like I'd just taken a weight off his little shoulders that he hadn't even realized he'd been carrying. Months later, when fall fully settled in and the trees blazed gold and crimson, Logan's school held a family day. Each student was supposed to bring one special person with them to share their project. When it was Logan's turn, he stood on the little makeshift stage, his voice a little shaky at first, but growing steadier with each word. "This is my family. My dad, Evan, and my other dad, Daniel. They make me feel safe even when the world is loud. They listen when I need to talk, and they love me even when I'm messy. That's how I know it's real." The room blurred around me. Daniel squeezed my hand under the table. Logan didn't mention anyone else. Not once, not Victoria, not Grandpa Henry, not Grandma Ruth. And I realized that for him, family wasn't about bloodlines or guilt trips. It was about who stayed, who listened, who loved without demanding anything in return. That night, after Logan fell asleep, Daniel and I sat out on the back porch again, bundled in hoodies against the crisp autumn air. The stars shimmered above us, clear and bright. Max, our old mutt, snored softly at our feet. Daniel nudged me with his shoulder. "Still think you did the wrong thing?" he asked quietly. I shook my head, smiling up at the stars. "No," I said. "For the first time, I think I finally did the right thing." He didn't say anything. He just took my hand and held it there, steady, certain, real. Freedom didn't come in a grand explosion. It didn't come with apologies or grand reconciliations. It came quietly, in small, sure steps away from hurt, towards something honest, towards something whole, and it was ours. Finally, truly ours. Story 2. If you ask me about my childhood, I'll probably give you some vague rehearsed line like, "It was fine, thanks," and change the subject. The truth is, it was fine, and also miserable. I'm Lauren, 36 years old now, and only recently able to talk about all of this without feeling like I'm betraying my past self, or my younger self who tried so damn hard to be seen. It started when I was 8. That's when my little brother, Daniel, came storming into the world 3 months early, weighing barely more than a loaf of bread. I remember my dad throwing on his jacket inside out and sprinting out the door at 3 a.m. while my Aunt Carrie scooped me up and promised everything would be okay. It wasn't bad at first. Scary, sure. Hospitals smell like metal and sadness, and I spent way too many nights at Aunt Carrie's house colouring with broken crayons while adults whispered over coffee. But I didn't really mind. I wanted Daniel to be okay too. He survived, barely, and our house changed forever. We didn't just become a house with a baby. We became a fragile ecosystem where one wrong sneeze could end the world. Everything smelled like bleach. Mum was obsessed with disinfecting every surface. If I even looked like I might be getting a cold, I was packed off to Grandma's like a ticking time bomb. At first, it felt like an adventure. Sleep over at Grandma's! But even an 8-year-old figures it out eventually. They were pushing me away because they were scared. And somehow, I was the threat. Still, I was determined to be the good kid. The easy one. I threw myself into school like my life depended on it. Perfect grades, science fairs, debate tournaments. I'd run home clutching trophies, my heart hammering with hope. "That's nice, honey," Mum would say. barely glancing up. "Did you wash your hands first?" Daniel's been coughing again. It didn't matter what I did. Daniel's needs always won. By the time he turned 7, Daniel wasn't even sick anymore. But nobody in our house ever got the memo. My parents hovered over him like bodyguards at a royal wedding, ready to throw themselves into the path of a rogue germ. And Daniel? He figured out real quick that pretending to be fragile was a golden ticket. "Oh no, my tummy hurts. I probably need a new Xbox." Guess who got a new Xbox? I kept my head down, telling myself high school would be different. I'd win scholarships. I'd make them proud. Instead, it was like living in a parallel universe. Every time something good happened for me, Daniel manufactured a crisis. Once, my science teacher pulled my parents aside to tell them I had a real shot at a full-ride scholarship. Mum's phone rang mid-sentence. Daniel was crying at home because he lost his favourite homework pen. They left. Just left. When I won the state debate championship, they didn't even bother displaying the trophy. "It makes Daniel feel bad," Mum said, slipping it into a drawer like it was something dirty. By college acceptance season, I'd built up this tiny ember of hope. Maybe now, finally, they'd have to see me. I had a full scholarship to state. Tuition, housing, books, everything covered. I walked through the front door, practically vibrating with excitement. Daniel looked up from the couch, deadpan. "Awesome. When are you moving out?" "I'm turning your room into a gaming lounge. I need space for my 3-monitor setup." And just like that, any fantasies I had about an emotional, hug-filled send-off evaporated. College was freedom in a way I can't even explain. I barely went home. I spent holidays on campus, volunteering or working odd jobs. Home was a pit stop, not a place to live. At 23 degree in hand, I snagged a management job at a mid-sized firm called Brenton and Associates. It was fine, not glamorous, not terrible. Enough to pay rent, order sushi once in a while, and build something that was finally mine. One late night, scrolling half delirious on my second-hand couch, an ad popped up, "Learn to make your money work for you." Normally, I'd scroll right past. But something about that night, maybe the exhaustion, maybe the lingering ache of wanting more, made me click. The course cost $99. I ate ramen noodles for 2 months to pay for it. Best $99 I ever spent. The instructor, Matt, broke down investing like he was explaining it to someone's confused aunt. No jargon, no weird get-rich-quick promises, just strategy. I started small, a few $100 in tech stocks, a little in biotech, some risky stuff here and there. I stayed up late reading finance blogs and lurking in investing forums. First, a $400 investment tripled. Then a biotech startup exploded in value, and I realized something life-changing. I could make more money investing part-time than working full-time. 2 years later, I quietly quit Brenton and Associates. Not with a big announcement, just a polite 2 weeks' notice and a well-timed thank you email. And every Saturday, I still went to family dinners, listening to my parents talk about Daniel like he was the second coming while my investments quietly compounded in the background. "You're still at Brenton's, right?" Mum would ask, stabbing dry chicken onto her plate. Yep, I'd lie, because the truth would have required them to care enough to ask deeper questions. Meanwhile, Daniel had enrolled at Halston University, a ridiculously expensive private school famous for Instagram influencers and fake entrepreneur degrees. "It's a sacrifice," Dad would sigh at dinners, "but Daniel deserves the best." I'd listen, nodding, calculating silently how much it would take to buy the house outright they were struggling to maintain. One Saturday, I came home and found Mom crying at the kitchen table, bills spread out like a losing poker hand. "We just can't keep up," she whispered. Daniel's tuition, the mortgage, the property taxes. Something inside me cracked a little. No matter how much they ignored me, they were still my parents. That night, I set up an anonymous transfer, $6,000 a month, into their account. Mum called the next day in tears. She didn't ask where the money came from. She didn't even thank me properly. She just said, "You're such a good daughter. Daniel will finally have what he needs." I let myself believe, for about 5 minutes, that maybe things were changing. I was wrong. The first time I overheard them planning to reroute my money to Daniel, I honestly thought I was imagining things. It was a few weeks after I started the monthly transfers. I was home for one of Mum's legendary Sunday dinners, which meant dry roast beef, wilted salad, and listening to Daniel complain about how all the other kids at Halston had designer sneakers. I was in the kitchen, stacking plates, when I heard Mum's voice float in from the living room. "I think we should give Daniel at least half of what Lauren's sending," she said, like she was discussing what brand of laundry detergent to buy. "Maybe more." "Poor thing, he needs to keep up appearances." Dad grunted in agreement. "Yeah, get him that Gucci backpack he wants. He's got to fit in." I stood there gripping a plate so hard I thought it might crack. They didn't see me. They weren't even whispering. They weren't ashamed. That's when it hit me. The money wasn't a gift to them. It was an entitlement. I didn't say anything. I didn't storm in or cause a scene. I just finished loading the dishwasher like a good little ghost daughter and left early, pretending I had work stuff. At 27, my investment portfolio crossed into numbers I never thought possible. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. Real estate, mutual funds, early-stage tech startups. Every month, I made more than I used to make in a year at Brenton and Associates. And still, Mum would call, sighing dramatically about Daniel's sacrifices, how he felt left out around rich kids. How it was so hard on him to only have a used car instead of something brand new. Meanwhile, when I got approved for my first condo downtown, 2 bedrooms, balcony view, I didn't even tell them. Didn't seem like they'd care anyway. I paid cash. No mortgage, no stress. Just keys in hand and a view that made me feel, for the first time in my life, completely free. Of course, when Mum found out I was moving, she still thought I was renting. Bless her. Her only comment was, "Just be careful, honey. The job market's unstable." "You're lucky Brenton's kept you around," I laughed. Not out loud, but deep inside, the kind of laugh you feel in your bones. By the time Daniel graduated, the family had basically turned every gathering into his personal fan club. I stopped bringing anything to show or share. What was the point? At his graduation party, they pulled out all the stops. Full catering, floral centerpieces, live music. I recognized the caterer's logo from one of the wire transfers I'd sent. Daniel made a beeline toward me halfway through the night, his diploma in hand like it was a sword. "Look at this, Lauren," he crowed. "Top of my class. Halston University. Not some state school." I smiled politely. "Congrats, Daniel." He leaned closer, voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Don't feel bad, okay? You'll find something you're good at too. Someday." It took everything in me not to burst out laughing. Someday? I was already making more in a week than his entire starting salary offer. But whatever. Let him have his moment. Let them all. 3 months later, reality crashed into him like a freight train. Turns out, fancy private school diplomas don't guarantee fancy private salaries. Daniel couldn't find a job. Not at the big tech companies he name-dropped. Not even at the mid-size firms. Every rejection email sent him spiraling. Every "we regret to inform you" shredded his already paper-thin ego. Meanwhile, the student loan bills started rolling in. And guess who they called? One evening, Mom rang me up, voice thick with tension. "Honey, you know we hate asking you for more, but Daniel's loans are crushing us. We were thinking, maybe you could increase your monthly help." I didn't even let her finish. "How much?" I asked, dead flat. She hesitated, like she knew she was pushing it. "Maybe $3,500. I thought about it. About the years they spent applauding Daniel's every move, while I was just furniture. But at the end of the day, $3,500 a month was pennies compared to what I had. "Fine," I said, hating myself a little. "Starting next month." She gushed her thanks, like I had just agreed to donate a kidney, not a word about me, about how I was doing. "Just thank you for helping Daniel, always Daniel." He eventually got a job, and, of course, it wasn't on his own merit. Dad pulled strings with an old college buddy who worked in HR nepotism. The family tradition. Even then, Daniel acted like he was too good for it, complained non-stop about the starting salary, the commute, the basic office furniture, and still lived at home. Thanksgiving that year was tense. Mum threw out her back trying to do all the prep work, dragging heavy laundry baskets, running around cooking everything from scratch, like it was the freaking Olympics. "Let me handle it," I offered. "I'll cater the whole thing. You can just enjoy it," she protested weakly, but I insisted. Ordered a full spread from one of the best places in the city, roast turkey, stuffing, sweet potato casserole, the works. It arrived on time, looked incredible, tasted even better. Halfway through dinner, Mum couldn't resist mentioning it. "I don't know what we would have done without Lauren," she said, gesturing to the perfect table. "She's been such a help." For the first time in maybe 15 years, the spotlight swung in my direction. I caught a glimpse of Daniel across the table, frozen fork in midair, his smile twitching. He didn't like that. Not one bit. After dessert, while everyone was milling around chatting, I slipped upstairs to my old bedroom to check on some market alerts. Asian markets opened during our evening, and I had a couple of stock positions to watch. I left my laptop open on the desk, logged in, monitoring the charts, no big deal, until I heard a noise behind me. I turned around and there was Daniel, standing there, staring at my screen, face shifting through about 17 emotions in real time. "What's this?" he asked, voice tight. "My investment account," I said, casual as anything. He stared a moment longer. Then he smirked and grabbed the laptop. Before I could stop him, he was halfway down the stairs. Downstairs, in front of every relative, Daniel slapped the laptop onto the dining room table and spun it around. "Hey everyone," he said, his voice way too bright. "Guess what Lauren's been hiding from us?" People leaned in. I lunged forward, but it was too late. The numbers were right there, in big, bold font. Checking account balance, $10,284, $192.46. You could hear the air get sucked out of the room. My cousin dropped his wine glass. Mum gasped so loud she practically swallowed the centerpiece. Dad's face went crimson. And Daniel, my golden child brother, just stood there looking like he'd discovered some horrible crime. "You've been rich this whole time," Mum screeched. "You've been hiding this from us?" I closed the laptop, slow and deliberate. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't apologize. "I wasn't hiding anything," I said, voice calm. "You just never asked." The silence after I said it was the loudest thing I've ever heard. Just heavy breathing, clinking forks, and the buzzing sound of the old ceiling fan overhead. "You selfish little brat," Mum spat, finally finding her voice. "We're drowning in debt. And you're hoarding millions?" I blinked at her, slow. "You mean the money I earned?" The money I didn't waste pretending Daniel was royalty? Dad slammed his fist on the table so hard a plate jumped. You owe us, Lauren. After everything we've done for you, I couldn't even laugh. It was too sad. You mean after you ignored me for 20 years while you bowed down to Daniel? Daniel, for his part, just stood there, mouth open, no words coming out, like he was trying to find a way to spin it in his favour and couldn't. Mum's voice climbed into that shrill range I hadn't heard since I was a kid being banished to Grandma's house for daring to have a cough. You need to give us some of that money, Lauren. Daniel needs help with his loans. We need to refinance the house. You owe your family. That word, owe, snapped something inside me. I owed them nothing. I looked around the table at all the people who had clapped for Daniel's participation awards, but buried my achievements in the junk drawer. The people who never asked what I wanted, what I dreamed about, who I was beyond being the other kid. I smiled, not angry, not sad, just done. I've already given enough, I said. More than you ever gave back. Daniel found his tongue then, of course. You're disgusting, he hissed. You think money makes you better than us? I shrugged. No, but the way you treated me, sure, makes me better off without you. And with that, I tucked my laptop under my arm, nodded once to Aunt Carrie, the only person there who looked remotely ashamed, and walked out. No yelling, no slamming doors, just done. They blew up my phone before I even hit the highway. Mum, Dad, Daniel blocked them all. Then came the social media smear campaign. Mum posted some long, dramatic Facebook status about how her ungrateful daughter abandoned her family for greed, how money changes people, how they sacrifice so much for me. Cue the flood of distant relatives and old neighbours piling on in the comments. So heartbreaking. How could she do this to you? Family is everything. I didn't bother replying. Let them believe whatever made them feel better. The ones who mattered, Aunt Carrie, my college friends, a few old co-workers, texted me quietly. Proud of you. Took guts. You're free now. A week later, Mom tried a different tactic. Guilt. She emailed me a picture of the house, cracked driveway, peeling paint, and wrote, "This is your family home, where you were raised, where we loved you. Please don't let it fall apart." Funny. It was already falling apart when I lived there, just not in ways you could see. I didn't respond. I cancelled the monthly transfer too. That direct deposit I'd been quietly sending them for years. Gone, like a ghost through a locked door. They didn't take it well. A few days after that, they actually showed up at my condo building. Security called me from the front desk. "There's a woman here crying, says she's your mother. Claims it's an emergency." I told them no, told them not to let her up. And for the first time, when I hung up the phone, I didn't feel guilty. I felt peaceful. The funny thing about cutting off toxic people, even when they're your own family, is that once you do it, you finally have room to breathe. I invested in a few more properties, started travelling more, learned how to scuba dive, spent Christmas on a beach in Bali instead of crying over turkey at a table where I didn't belong. I built a life that was mine, no apologies, no explanations. The last time I heard from Daniel, he sent a pathetic little text, "Hope you're happy being alone. Family was all you had." And maybe once, a long time ago, that would have gutted me. Maybe the old version of me, the little girl packed off to Grandma's house with a runny nose and a suitcase full of hurt, would have believed it. But not anymore. I looked around my condo, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows, the walls filled with photos of my adventures, my people, my memories. Alone? No, I was free. And honestly, freedom feels a hell of a lot better than fake family loyalty ever did. Story 3. The day my mum told me, "You're not invited to Lauren's barbecue," I didn't even get mad. I just laughed, said, "Good luck," and hung up. After years of quietly paying for their vacations, $6,500 year alone, it felt like a weight finally fell off my shoulders. It was a suffocating July evening. I was slumped on the old futon in my tiny studio apartment, flipping through a crinkled issue of Road Trips USA. I'd grabbed from a gas station free rack. The fan in the corner whined like it was dying, barely moving the hot, heavy air. I had my boots off, toes tapping against a chipped coffee table, when my cracked phone screen lit up with Mum. I figured she needed another favour, usually code for Alex. "Can you send money for groceries?" Or, "Lauren dropped her phone again. She needs a new one ASAP." I hit speaker without much thought, leaning back into the lumpy cushions, bracing for the usual guilt trip. But Mum's voice was cool, almost smug. "Alex," she said brightly, "Lauren's hosting the 4th of July barbecue this year. Your dad and I are covering everything. You're not invited." I sat up, magazines sliding off my lap. "Wait, what?" My voice came out rough, like I hadn't used it in days. "Yeah," she chirped, like she was telling me the weather. "Lauren's been down lately. She needs something to lift her spirits. We're paying for all of it, food, drinks, fireworks, the works. At her place, it's going to be great. Anyway, just so you know, it hit me harder than I expected. The 4th of July had been our one constant. Our no matter what day. You're funding Lauren's party," I said, my boots hitting the floor with a thud as I stood, pacing the tiny room. "And kicking me out." Mum sighed, that signature sigh, the one reserved for when I was being difficult. "Don't make this a thing, Alex. It's just one day. She's been having a hard time. You're fine. You don't need this the way she does." I froze, the words crackling over the speaker like static. "Hard time?" I snapped, my voice cracking like dry wood. "You mean posting Instagram selfies and complaining about her mental health journey while I'm busting my ass at the warehouse?" I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, feeling the sweat bead at my hairline. I shelled out $6,500 year alone for vacations cabins, gas, groceries, Lauren's fancy gelato, and now you're telling me I'm selfish because I expected a little basic decency. "What's your tone?" Mum snapped. There it was. That familiar pivot when the truth got too loud. I was suddenly the bad guy. "I covered every single trip since Lauren's candle shop flopped 2 years ago," I said, pacing the creaky floorboards. Hotels, boats, food, gas, sunscreen, floaties she left in the garage. All of it. "And now you're telling me Lauren needs the celebration, and I need to suck it up." "Family is family," Mum said flatly, like a courtroom verdict. "Lauren's had it rough. You're tough. You'll be fine." I stared out the grimy window at the dead-end street below. It wasn't just the barbecue. It was everything. Every time Lauren blew money on bad investments, I bailed her out. Every time she cried about needing a fresh start, I bought her the plane tickets. Every family gathering? Paid in part or whole by me because you're good with money, Alex. That was the thanks. I hung up without another word, my hands trembling as I grabbed my laptop off the cluttered kitchen counter. Logged into the vacation rental site. Pulled up the upcoming cabin trip, the one I had paid the deposit for months ago. $800 sunk into a lake house up north, the traditional post 4th getaway. Cursor hovering. Click. Cancel booking. Refund pending. The screen flashed. Good. Let's see how their perfect summer goes without me footing the bill. The heatwave crept in fast after that. Each day heavier than the last, the asphalt outside shimmering under the relentless sun. I kept grinding at work, hauling pallets and loading trucks in the stifling warehouse, coming home each night drenched exhausted and strangely at peace. No calls from them. Not yet. One night, desperate for a break, I hit up a little diner a few blocks away. I slid into a cracked vinyl booth across from my buddy, Wes, who immediately stole half my fries like it was his God-given right. "You look like hell," he said, grinning around a mouthful of burger. "Mom disinvited me from Lauren's barbecue," I said, stabbing a fry into the ketchup, "after I paid for literally everything else this year." Wes whistled low. Brutal. I nodded, savouring the cold sting of my soda. "Cancelled the lake house too. Let Emma sweat." He barked out a laugh so loud it turned heads. "Damn, Alex. Ice cold." I smiled for real, clinking my glass against his. They picked their favourite. I picked my piece. As the 4th drew closer, the heat thickened. The city felt like a furnace. The AC units in my building rattled weakly, trying and failing to keep up. I imagined them setting up for Lauren's big day, Mom lugging trays of food, Dad firing up the grill, Lauren posing with sparklers for social media clout. I grilled a lonely hot dog on my stove, savouring the quiet rebellion. The 5th of July came, and with it, a text from Mum. "Alex, the lake house reservation was cancelled. What's going on? We need it." I set the phone down without replying. Let them figure it out. An hour later, Dad's voicemail came in, his voice rough and impatient. "Call me back, Alex. Get the cabin fixed. Now." "Nope. Not my circus anymore." Lauren's text came last, pure venom. "You ruined everything. It's unbearable here." I smirked, cracking open a cold beer. The heat wave was just getting started. And so was their lesson. The first few days after the 4th were blissfully quiet. No guilt trips, no fake emergencies. Just me, my busted fan humming like a dying bee, and cold sodas sweating on my coffee table. I still went to work, still loaded pallets in the blazing sun. But every time my phone buzzed, I'd glance at it, see another text from Mum, Dad, or Lauren, and just keep moving. Let Em sit in it. By July 6th, the messages turned from passive-aggressive pokes to full-on panic. "Alex, it's 94 degrees in the house, and the AC is barely working. We need that cabin. Call the owner and fix this. Lauren is miserable after working so hard on the party. You're being cruel." I cracked a beer on my porch that night, watching the streetlights flicker, the heat rising off the blacktop like a living thing. Miserable, huh? Poor thing. Maybe they should have thought about that before they decided to slice me out of the family barbecue like I was the weird neighbour kid nobody wanted around. By July 8th, the real desperation set in. Mum's texts came rapid fire. "Alex, please. It's 97 degrees. The air inside is thick. We're all stuck here. We don't have another trip planned." Lauren's upset. Dad left a gruff voicemail, his voice strained and cracking. "Call the damn rental company. Pay again. Whatever it takes." Lauren, true to form, sent one dripping with drama. "I'm dying in this heat. I can't believe you would do this to your own family." Funny, they hadn't seen me as family when they were sipping cocktails at Lauren's barbecue, had they? I didn't even bother replying. Every time the phone buzzed, it just made my burger taste better. Their meltdown was seasoning my food. By the 2nd week of July, things had clearly gotten worse. I was at the laundromat, folding stiff jeans that still smelled faintly like warehouse dust, when Wes called me, barely able to get the words out through his laughter. "Dude," he gasped. "You checking Facebook?" "No," I said, stuffing socks into a duffel bag. "Why?" "They're posting about the unbearable heat and how they're praying for relief. Your mum tagged like 5 weather pages begging for rain." I shook my head, snorting. "They still haven't booked anything?" "Nope. Everything's gone. Peak season." Plus, the heat waves got everyone grabbing whatever's left. He wheezed out another laugh. Lauren posted some sad selfie with a caption like melting into oblivion. I chuckled. Low and steady. Let Emma melt. I spent years covering their fun while Lauren made excuses. Not my job anymore. The worst of it hit around July 13th. The city officially declared a heat emergency. Warnings blared on the radio. Stay indoors. Hydrate. Avoid unnecessary travel. I came home that afternoon, sweating through my shirt, grabbed a cold Coke from the fridge, and found 17 missed calls. 17. Mom, Dad, Lauren, even Aunt Michelle for some reason. I played one voicemail at random. It was Mom, near tears. Alex, the air inside the house is like an oven. We need a place to go. Please. We're sorry about before. We didn't mean to hurt you. There it was. The cracks finally breaking open. I leaned back on the couch, Coke sweating onto my jeans, and let the hum of the fan fill the space where guilt used to live. Funny how fast people remember you exist when they need something. Later that night, the doorbell rang. It was Dad, standing there like a wilted houseplant shirt soaked, eyes bloodshot, breathing heavy like he'd run a marathon. I cracked the door just enough for the cool air to leak out and hit him in the face. Didn't invite him in. Didn't even move. Alex, he rasped, we need the cabin. It's too hot. Your mum's not doing well. Lauren's locked herself in the bathroom crying. You made your point. Enough already. I just tilted my head at him. Made my point, I said, voice calm. You kicked me out of the one family tradition we actually kept. After I spent $6,000 this year covering all your vacations, and when I got upset, you called me selfish. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Just heavy, laboured breathing. We're family, Alex, he finally said, desperation cracking his voice. You can't turn your back on us now. I stepped closer to the doorframe, arms crossed. You turned your back on me first. You just didn't expect consequences. I waited a beat, watched him fidget. Figure it out, Dad. Then I closed the door. Didn't slam it. Didn't yell. Just a quiet final click as the lock slid home. I watched from the window as he shuffled back to his car, shoulders slumped, heat waves dancing around him like smoke. Back inside, I cracked another beer and texted Wes. They're cooked. He replied with 3 laughing emojis and a gif of a roasted turkey. Perfect. By mid-July, the meltdown was in full swing. Mum's texts were borderline unhinged. We can't sleep at night. The house is a sauna. Lauren's getting sick from the heat. How could you abandon us like this? Every message just proved my point louder. They never needed me until I was useful. They never apologized until their comfort was at risk. They never treated me like family until it was convenient. I went to the corner market, bought a cheap kiddie pool, and set it up on my postage stamp balcony. Sat there in shorts, ankles in the cold water, sipping sweet tea while the sun baked everything around me. Freedom never tasted so good. The last week of July felt like nature itself was punishing them. The heat didn't break. It just got worse, like the sun had parked right over the city and refused to move. News stations begged people to stay indoors. Libraries and grocery stores opened as cooling centres. Old folks' homes were losing power. And my phone? It never stopped buzzing. Mum's texts were frantic. Dad's voicemails were louder, angrier. Lauren's messages were a messy mix of guilt trips and insults, like she couldn't decide if she wanted to beg or blame. Alex, please, we're sorry. You're being cruel. You're better than this. Family doesn't abandon each other in times like this. I didn't answer. I didn't even open half of them, because deep down I already knew the truth. They didn't miss me. They missed what I did for them. Big difference. Around July 25th, Wes dropped by with a case of cheap beer and a beat-up camping chair. We set up shop on the balcony, legs dunked in the kiddie pool, sweating and laughing like kids at recess. "You hear from the royal family today?" he asked, tossing me a can. Mum left a voicemail crying about how Lauren had to take cold showers 3 times a day just to survive, I said, cracking it open. Said the kitchen was too hot to cook. Asked if I'd reconsider paying for a new cabin if they promised things would change. Wes snorted, nearly spilling his drink. Promised, huh? Sounds legit. Definitely trustworthy after the whole "you're not invited" stunt. I smiled, watching the heat blur the edges of the buildings around us. I told them to stay hydrated. That was it. Wes laughed so hard he nearly tipped over backward. I didn't even flinch, because it felt good. Not petty, not cruel. Just right. They built that wall. I just decided I wasn't going to keep banging my head against it anymore. By August, the city finally got a break, a few rainy days, some cooler nights. The heat warnings dropped. People started posting about fresh starts and finally being able to breathe again. I didn't hear much from my family after that. Just a couple passive-aggressive hope, "you're well" texts from Mum. Nothing from Dad. Lauren unfollowed me on Instagram, like that was supposed to hurt. I let the silence stretch out, wide and clean. Like fresh paint on a wall. Like turning a page and leaving the last one blank. A couple weeks later, I ran into my cousin Tara at the hardware store. She looked uncomfortable, shifting from foot to foot near the paint aisle. "Hey, Alex," she said, picking at her sleeve. Your mum's been, telling everyone you abandoned the family." I shrugged, tossing a pack of screws into my basket. Sounds about right. Tara bit her lip. For what it's worth, a lot of us knew they treated you like crap. We just didn't know what to say. I looked at her, really looked, and for once, didn't feel the old anger bubble up. It wasn't her fight. Never had been. "Thanks," I said simply, and meant it. She offered a small smile, awkward but genuine. "You doing okay?" Better than okay, actually. But I just said, "Yeah, real good." I left the store with a new set of tools and a lightness I hadn't felt in years. No heavy backpack full of resentment. No invisible debt I could never repay. No trying to earn my seat at a table they were always ready to pull out from under me. The fall came on slow and cool. I spent weekends fixing up my place, planting some cheap mums in chipped pots on the balcony, grilling chicken on my tiny stove. The quiet didn't feel lonely. It felt like a promise. One night in early September, I was sitting out on the balcony, feet in the kiddie pool, even though the air had that first bite of autumn in it, when my phone buzzed again. "Mom, again." I stared at the screen a long time. Didn't answer, didn't open it. Just let it sit there, buzzing once, then falling silent. Because here's the thing, nobody tells you when you finally choose yourself over people who only take, the guilt fades, the peace stays. They built their barbecue without me. Let them build their consequences too. I leaned back, staring at the stars slipping between the city haze, beer cool in my hand, and smiled. Some bridges, they're better left burned. And I was done standing in the smoke,